The moment power loses control, character reveals itself. The ballroom of the Grand Crescent Hotel shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers worth more than most people's homes. Waiters moved silently between tables covered in white linen and polished silver. A string quartet played near the stage while some of the most influential business leaders in the country exchanged handshakes, contracts, and carefully practiced smiles. It was the annual charity gala hosted by Victor Chun, the Chinese billionaire founder of a global technology empire. Everything about the evening reflected precision, status, and control. And Victor Chun valued control above almost everything else. At 45 years old, he had built a reputation as a brilliant businessman and a demanding perfectionist. Employees respected him. Competitors feared him. Investors admired him. Very few people ever challenged him. Across the ballroom, Monica Harris adjusted a serving tray and glanced toward the crowd. At 31 years old, she had worked countless events like this one. Wealthy guests, expensive suits, important conversations. None of it impressed her anymore. Her focus remained simple. Serve guests professionally. Finish the shift. Go home to her family. Monica moved through the ballroom with calm confidence, greeting guests with a polite smile and helping newer staff navigate the busy floor. Most attendees barely noticed her. To them, she was simply another waitress. Invisible, replaceable, easy to overlook. Near the center of the ballroom, Victor stood surrounded by executives discussing an upcoming acquisition worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Cameras flashed occasionally as reporters documented the event. Everything appeared perfect. Then a small accident changed the atmosphere in seconds. A guest carrying a drink turned unexpectedly near one of the cocktail tables. His elbow brushed against another attendee. The movement sent a glass tipping sideways. Amber liquid splashed across the edge of a table and onto the sleeve of Victor's expensive jacket. The room seemed to pause. Conversations softened. Several guests looked over immediately. The accident had happened quickly. So quickly that many people did not see who was responsible. Victor looked down at his stained sleeve. His expression darkened. Frustration flashed across his face. Then his eyes landed on Monica, who happened to be closest to the scene. She had not touched the glass. She had not caused the spill. But in that moment, she became the easiest target for his anger. Monica approached with a clean cloth, intending to help. Before she could explain anything, Victor's voice cut through the room. Sharp, cold, public. Several nearby guests stopped talking entirely. Monica froze. The attention of dozens of people shifted toward her. Victor's frustration continued to grow as he assumed she had been responsible for the disruption. The pressure of the evening, the business negotiations, and the constant expectations surrounding him seemed to collapse into a single moment of misplaced blame. Monica listened quietly. She could feel the eyes of strangers watching. Some appeared uncomfortable. Others simply watched in silence. Yet Monica did not argue. She did not raise her voice. She did not embarrass him in return. Instead, she stood with quiet dignity, holding the cloth in her hands and maintaining her composure. Something about her calmness felt almost unsettling, as if she refused to let someone else's anger determine who she was. Around the ballroom, whispers began spreading from table to table. People sensed that something had gone wrong, very wrong, and none of them realized that within moments, the entire evening would take a direction nobody could have predicted. The silence that followed felt heavier than the music still drifting through the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Wealthy donors resumed breathing. Conversations remained frozen. Monica Harris stood exactly where she was, surrounded by strangers who suddenly seemed far more interested in watching than helping. Victor Chin expected resistance. He expected excuses. He expected someone to argue. Throughout his career, people always reacted when challenged. They defended themselves. They explained. They fought to protect their pride. Monica did none of those things. She simply met his gaze for a brief moment and then lowered her eyes respectfully. Not out of fear, not out of weakness, out of discipline. The difference was subtle, but anyone paying close attention could feel it. Victor noticed it too. Somehow her calm response irritated him more than an argument would have. The stain remained on his sleeve. The pressure of the evening remained on his shoulders. Investors, reporters, executives, and community leaders surrounded him. The expectations never stopped. Yet standing before him was a woman who refused to let his frustration become her own. Monica quietly offered the clean cloth again. Her voice remained steady. "Sir, let me help with that." Several guests exchanged surprised glances. No bitterness. No sarcasm. No anger. Just professionalism. Victor looked at the cloth, but did not take it immediately. Around them, the tension continued to spread. Nearby servers stopped moving. A manager began walking toward the scene before hesitating. Even members of the event staff seemed unsure what to do next. Monica could feel every eye in the room. Years earlier, that kind of attention might have shaken her. Life had taught her different lessons. She remembered long hospital visits with her father. She remembered working double shifts to help support her family. She remembered countless moments when dignity mattered more than pride. Compared to those challenges, a room full of strangers was not enough to break her composure. One elderly woman seated near the front of the ballroom watched Monica carefully. The woman leaned toward her husband and whispered something. He nodded slowly. Across another table, two executives exchanged uncomfortable looks. They had attended enough corporate events to recognize when a situation was beginning to drift in the wrong direction. Yet nobody stepped forward. Human nature often preferred observation over intervention. Victor finally accepted the cloth. Monica handed it to him without a word. Their hands barely touched. For a moment, the billionaire CEO seemed ready to continue the confrontation. Then something unexpected happened. Monica simply stepped back and returned her attention to her work. No dramatic exit. No emotional reaction. No attempt to gain sympathy from the crowd. She picked up her serving tray and checked on a nearby table as though the entire incident had never happened. That decision confused people more than any argument could have. Guests continued watching her. Some expected tears. Others expected anger. Instead, they saw a woman serving water, answering questions, and helping attendees find their seats. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Victor remained standing near the center of the ballroom. His frustration had not disappeared, yet something felt different now. The attention that had initially focused on Monica was beginning to shift. People were no longer studying the waitress. They were quietly studying him. The realization unsettled him. A strange sensation passed through his chest. At first he ignored it. Then it returned. Slightly stronger this time. He loosened his collar and took a slow breath. The room suddenly felt warmer than before. The lights appeared brighter. The distant sound of conversation seemed strangely muffled. Across the ballroom, Monica glanced in his direction for only a second. Her expression revealed neither resentment nor satisfaction, only concern. And within moments, the entire evening was about to change. Victor Chun pressed two fingers against the edge of the table and forced himself to remain standing. The strange sensation in his chest returned again, stronger this time. He told himself it was exhaustion. The past week had been relentless. International flights, investor meetings, endless negotiations. He had slept very little. Even so, something felt wrong. Around him, the gala slowly resumed. Conversations restarted. Glasses clinked. Musicians continued playing. Yet the room seemed distant now, as though a thin wall had appeared between Victor and everyone else. One of his executives stepped closer. "Are you all right?" Victor nodded immediately. The answer came automatically. He had spent decades projecting confidence. Powerful people were expected to look strong even when they were struggling. "I am fine," he said, but the words felt less convincing than usual. Across the ballroom, Monica finished serving a nearby table. She noticed Victor adjust his collar again. Then she saw him grip the back of a chair for balance. Most people missed it. Monica did not. Years of caring for family members had taught her to notice small details. The slight tension in his face, the change in his breathing, the faint loss of color beneath his skin tone. Tiny warning signs. Signs that many people overlooked until it was too late. Monica watched quietly. She hoped she was mistaken. Victor attempted to return to his conversation with several donors. One man discussed a charitable foundation. Another spoke about an upcoming partnership. Victor heard their voices but struggled to focus on the words. A wave of dizziness rolled through him unexpectedly. He blinked hard. The ballroom lights blurred for a brief second before coming back into focus. He reached for a glass of water sitting on the table nearby. His hand was not as steady as he wanted it to be. A few guests noticed. Concern began replacing curiosity. The elderly woman who had observed the earlier incident now watched Victor with growing unease. Nearby reporters lowered their cameras. Something was clearly changing. Victor took a sip of water and attempted to steady himself. For a moment, it seemed to work. Then another wave hit. Stronger. Faster. The room tilted slightly. The voices around him became muffled. His vision narrowed. He placed a hand against the table again. This time, everyone noticed. Conversation stopped. The string quartet faltered. A violinist lowered her bow. Victor tried to take a step forward. Instead, his knees weakened beneath him. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Several executives lunged forward instinctively, but they were too far away. In a matter of seconds, the most powerful man in the room lost his balance completely. He collapsed heavily onto the polished floor. Shock swept through the crowd. Chairs scraped backward. Guests stood abruptly. Panic spread faster than any rumor. Someone shouted for security. Another called for medical assistance. Several people rushed toward Victor, but uncertainty froze them almost immediately. Nobody seemed to know what to do next. The billionaire lay motionless for a moment, disoriented and struggling to understand what had happened. Fear appeared on faces throughout the ballroom. The charity gala had transformed into a crisis. And in the middle of that confusion, one person moved without hesitation. Monica set down her serving tray before it even touched the table. She was already crossing the ballroom, while everyone else was still reacting. The same woman who had been blamed only moments earlier became the first person running toward the man who had publicly humiliated her. As frightened guests parted to make room, Monica dropped to her knees beside Victor Chun, her expression calm, focused, and completely free of resentment. The crowd formed a wide circle around Victor Chun as confusion swept through the ballroom. Expensive suits, sparkling jewelry, and polished smiles disappeared beneath genuine concern. People who had spent the evening discussing business strategies and charitable donations now stood frozen, uncertain how to help. Monica Harris remained focused. The noise around her seemed to fade into the background. Years of experience caring for her father had taught her something valuable. Panic rarely solved problems. Calmness often did. She knelt beside Victor and spoke clearly. "Mr. Chun, can you hear me?" Victor blinked slowly. His breathing was uneven. The dizziness had not completely passed. He looked disoriented, struggling to understand why the room was suddenly surrounding him. Monica carefully encouraged him to remain still. Several executives crowded closer. Security personnel rushed forward. A manager arrived, visibly shaken. Everyone seemed eager to help, but nobody appeared certain what to do first. Monica looked up. "Please give him some space." Her voice was firm without being aggressive. The authority surprised several people. They listened immediately. The crowd stepped back. Fresh air circulated around Victor. Monica asked someone to call emergency medical services if they had not already done so. Another guest confirmed that help was on the way. Throughout the ballroom, worried conversations continued in hushed tones. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Less than 15 minutes earlier, Monica had been standing silently while absorbing public criticism. Now she was the person everyone depended on. Victor looked up at her. Recognition slowly returned to his eyes. For a brief moment, embarrassment appeared on his face. He remembered exactly who was helping him. Monica did not acknowledge it. She did not remind him of what had happened. She did not seek an apology. Her attention remained entirely on his well-being. "Try taking slow breaths," she said calmly. Victor followed her instructions. The trembling in his hands gradually eased. Nearby guests exchanged surprised glances. The waitress seemed remarkably composed. One executive leaned toward another and whispered, "How does she know what to do?" No one had an answer. Monica asked several simple questions to help Victor remain alert and focused. He answered each one. The responses reassured her somewhat. The immediate danger appeared to be decreasing, though concern remained in her eyes. Across the ballroom, reporters who had initially rushed toward the incident lowered their cameras. Something unexpected was unfolding. This was no longer a story about a billionaire experiencing a public medical episode. It was becoming a story about character. An elderly donor who had witnessed the earlier misunderstanding shook her head softly. "That young woman has more grace than most people in this room," she quietly told her husband. He nodded in agreement. The statement spread no farther than their table, yet many seemed to be arriving at the same conclusion independently. Victor slowly pushed himself into a seated position with Monica's guidance. Color began returning to his face. The dizziness was fading. Around him, Concern transformed into relief. Sirens could be heard faintly in the distance. Professional help was approaching. Yet the atmosphere inside the ballroom had already changed. People were no longer focused on wealth, status, or influence. They were watching a woman who had every reason to walk away choose compassion instead. Victor looked directly at Monica again. This time there was no frustration in his eyes. No impatience. No authority. Only confusion, gratitude, and the first small signs of humility. And as emergency responders entered the hotel lobby downstairs, a question began quietly moving through the minds of everyone who had witnessed the scene. Who exactly was Monica Harris? And why did she seem far more prepared for this moment than anyone else in the room? Emergency medical personnel arrived within minutes. Their equipment bags rolled across the polished ballroom floor as guests stepped aside. The atmosphere remained tense, but the panic had largely disappeared. Monica Harris stood and moved back respectfully to give the professionals room to work. One of the paramedics immediately began asking Victor Chin questions while another checked his vital signs. Nearby executives watched anxiously. Several board members had gathered near the entrance. Reporters remained unusually quiet. Nobody wanted to interrupt the assessment. Victor answered the questions clearly. His condition appeared stable. The dizziness had passed. His breathing had normalized. Relief spread through the room. The lead paramedic eventually nodded. You should still follow up with your physician, but this appears to be a combination of exhaustion, stress, dehydration, and overwork. The words seemed to surprise nobody except Victor himself. Deep down, he knew they were probably right. For months, he had ignored warning signs. Long flights, short nights, endless meetings, constant pressure. His company continued growing, but his personal health had quietly moved lower and lower on the priority list. As the medical team packed their equipment, one of the paramedics glanced toward Monica. Was she the one helping him before we arrived? Several people immediately pointed toward her. The paramedic smiled. She did exactly the right things. The comment triggered another wave of curiosity. More than one executive looked at Monica differently now. One guest finally asked the question everyone seemed to be thinking. How did you know what to do? Monica appeared slightly uncomfortable with the attention. She never enjoyed being the center of a room. She offered a small smile and shrugged gently. I have some experience. The answer only made people more curious. Before anyone could ask another question, the paramedic spoke again. Some experience? He laughed softly. Most people freeze during situations like this. She stayed calm, organized the crowd, monitored him, and kept him responsive. That is not a random skill. The room grew quiet once more. Monica looked down briefly. Memories surfaced. Hospital corridors, waiting rooms, long nights beside a bed. Years that had shaped her far more than anyone in the ballroom could imagine. An elderly donor approached cautiously. Were you a nurse? Monica shook her head. No, the woman waited for more. After a brief pause, Monica finally explained. Years ago, I studied nursing. Several people exchanged surprised looks. Monica continued before anyone could interrupt. I completed most of the program, but life changed. Her voice remained calm. There was no self-pity in it. My father became seriously ill. I left school so I could help take care of him. Silence settled over the group. The explanation carried more weight than any dramatic speech could have. Monica did not describe sacrifices. She did not list hardships. She simply stated the facts. Yet everyone understood what those facts meant. Victor listened carefully from his chair. For the first time that evening, he saw her through a completely different lens. Not as a waitress, not as an employee, not as someone standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. He saw a woman who had put family before ambition, responsibility before recognition, compassion before personal advancement. One of the executives quietly asked, "And after your father passed away?" Monica offered a faint smile. Bills still needed to be paid. The simplicity of the answer struck the room harder than any elaborate explanation. No complaints, no resentment, just reality. The ballroom suddenly felt different. Earlier, people had viewed Monica as part of the event staff. Now they were beginning to see the person behind the uniform. And as Victor sat listening to her story, another uncomfortable realization started taking shape. The woman he had judged within seconds possessed more strength, discipline, and quiet dignity than he had bothered to recognize. What he did not yet know was that the evening's biggest revelation was still waiting to emerge. The ballroom slowly began returning to normal, but the atmosphere had changed permanently. Guests resumed their conversations in quieter voices. Reporters exchanged observations instead of photographs. Musicians restarted their performance, though the elegant melodies now seemed softer, almost reflective. What had happened in the past hour lingered in every corner of the room. Victor Chin remained seated near one of the tables while several executives encouraged him to rest. Yet his attention kept drifting toward Monica Harris. She had already returned to work. That fact amazed him more than anything else. After everything that had happened, after becoming the focus of the entire gala, she was once again carrying trays, assisting guests, and helping coworkers. There was no performance in her behavior, no attempt to capitalize on attention. She simply continued doing her job. Across the ballroom, a group of hotel staff members quietly gathered near a security station. One of the managers had requested access to surveillance footage from earlier in the evening. At first, the review was intended only to understand exactly how the original incident had occurred. Yet within minutes, several people were staring at the monitor in complete silence. The video showed the sequence clearly. The crowded ballroom, the guest turning unexpectedly, the accidental collision near the cocktail table, the drink tipping sideways, the liquid splashing onto Victor's jacket. Every angle confirmed the same thing. Monica had not touched the glass. She had not caused the spill. She had not even been standing close enough to influence what happened. The entire accusation had been based on a false assumption. The manager immediately felt his stomach tighten. One employee covered her mouth in disbelief. Another shook his head slowly. The evidence was undeniable. Word spread quietly among senior staff. Eventually, one of the executives approached Victor carrying a tablet. His expression looked unusually serious. "There is something you should see." Victor accepted the device without speaking. The executive replayed the footage. For several seconds, nobody said a word. Victor watched the scene unfold from beginning to end. Then he watched it again and again. Each viewing made the truth harder to avoid. Monica had been completely innocent. The realization landed with unexpected force. Earlier that evening, he had convinced himself that frustration justified certainty. Now certainty was gone. All that remained was the uncomfortable reality of his mistake. Around him, several executives avoided eye contact. They knew what he was feeling. The problem was not simply that he had been wrong. Powerful people made mistakes all the time. The problem was that he had made his judgment publicly, and the person he judged had responded with more grace than he deserved. Victor looked across the ballroom. Monica was helping an elderly guest find her coat. Her smile looked exactly the same as before. No bitterness, no anger, no attempt to embarrass him. The contrast made him increasingly uncomfortable. One executive finally broke the silence. She never said a word. Victor nodded slowly. The statement was true. Monica could have defended herself. She could have argued. She could have pointed fingers at the actual person responsible. Instead, she chose restraint. Then, when he needed help most, she became the first person to come to his side. Victor lowered the tablet and stared at the screen one final time. The footage had revealed more than the truth about a spilled drink. It had revealed the danger of assumptions, the danger of pride. And as he watched Monica continue serving guests who would never know what she had done that evening, Victor began feeling something he rarely experienced: genuine shame. Because for the first time that night, he fully understood that the person who had shown the greatest character in the room was the very person he had treated unfairly. The gala finally ended close to midnight. Limousines departed beneath the glow of hotel lights. Reporters packed away their equipment. Guests returned to their lives carrying stories about the evening's unexpected events. Yet Victor Chun remained behind long after most people had left. He sat alone inside a private conference room overlooking the city skyline. The surveillance footage still occupied his thoughts. Monica's calm response occupied them even more. For years, Victor had measured people through performance, results, and titles. Success had trained him to make rapid judgments. Most of the time, those judgments served him well. This time, they had failed him completely. Across town, Monica finished her shift and boarded a late-night train home. The events of the evening replayed in her mind, but not in the way others might have expected. She was not focused on embarrassment. She was not replaying the public criticism. Instead, she worried whether Victor had followed the medical team's advice. Her father had taught her something years ago. Holding on to resentment only made difficult days heavier. Life already provided enough weight without adding more. The following morning, Victor arrived at corporate headquarters earlier than usual. He requested personnel records connected to the hotel's event staff. Human Resources assumed he was investigating the incident from the gala. What he discovered surprised him. Monica Harris had worked for the company for nearly 6 years. Her evaluations were exceptional. Guests consistently praised her professionalism. Co-workers described her as dependable, patient, and generous with her time. Several managers specifically mentioned that she often helped train new employees despite receiving no additional compensation. Victor continued reading. Then another detail caught his attention. During a severe winter storm 2 years earlier, Monica had voluntarily remained at the hotel overnight to help stranded guests. During a power outage, she had assisted elderly visitors and coordinated support efforts until emergency services arrived. None of these actions had generated publicity. Most had never reached senior leadership. Yet the pattern was impossible to ignore. Monica consistently chose responsibility when nobody was watching. Victor leaned back in his chair. The shame he felt from the previous evening deepened. He had judged her based on a single assumption. The reality was far more impressive than he imagined. Later that afternoon, he quietly visited the hotel again. This time there were no cameras, no donors, no executives, no gala. The restaurant inside the hotel operated as usual. Guests enjoyed lunch. Employees moved between tables. Monica was helping a young server learn the reservation system. She explained everything patiently. When the trainee made a mistake, Monica corrected it without criticism. Victor observed from a distance. The behavior matched everything he had read. Character revealed itself in small moments. Eventually, one of the hotel managers noticed him. "Mr. Chun, is everything all right?" Victor nodded. "Yes." Then he paused. "I would like to know more about Monica Harris." The manager smiled slightly. "You are not the first person to ask that this week." Victor looked surprised. The manager continued. "Most people who work with her eventually notice the same thing. She makes everyone around her better." Victor followed Monica with his eyes as she carried menus toward a table near the window. For the first time since the incident, he began understanding the full weight of his mistake. He had assumed he was looking at an ordinary waitress. In reality, he had been looking at an extraordinary person. And as Monica continued serving guests completely unaware of the investigation unfolding around her, Victor made a decision. He would not allow the story to end with private regret. Because some mistakes deserved more than silent reflection. Some mistakes required action. 3 days later, Monica Harris arrived for her afternoon shift, expecting an ordinary day. The lunch crowd was beginning to thin. Sunlight poured through the restaurant windows and reflected across polished tables. Employees moved through familiar routines. Orders were taken. Meals were delivered. Nothing seemed unusual. Yet shortly after she tied on her apron, the hotel manager approached with an expression she could not quite read. "Monica, could you join us in the conference room upstairs?" She looked confused. Did something happen? The manager smiled softly. Not exactly. A few minutes later, Monica entered one of the hotel's executive meeting rooms. To her surprise, several department heads were already seated around the table. Human Resources representatives were present. Senior managers were there as well. Then she noticed Victor Chun standing near the window. The sight immediately caught her off guard. She had not spoken to him since the gala. The room fell quiet as she entered. Monica suddenly felt far more nervous than she had while helping him during the medical emergency. Victor stepped forward. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then the Billionaire CEO did something nobody in the room expected. He bowed his head slightly. Not dramatically, not for attention, simply as a gesture of respect. "Monica," he said calmly, "I owe you an apology." The room remained completely silent. Victor continued. "I made an assumption about you without knowing the facts. I judged you unfairly. I did so publicly. And despite that, when I needed help, you chose compassion over resentment." Monica looked genuinely surprised. She had expected many things. A formal conversation. Perhaps a thank you. She had not expected this. Victor continued speaking. "I reviewed the footage. I learned the truth. More importantly, I learned about you." Several managers exchanged glances. Victor described the reports he had read, the stories from supervisors, the accounts from co-workers, the years of service, the acts of kindness, the sacrifices made for family. Monica listened quietly, growing increasingly uncomfortable with being praised in front of so many people. That discomfort only reinforced everything Victor had learned. She was not motivated by recognition. Finally, Victor placed a folder on the table. There is something else. Monica looked at the folder but did not open it immediately. Victor explained that the company was launching a new employee development initiative focused on leadership, crisis response, and guest care. Then he revealed the surprising part. He wanted Monica involved in helping design the program. The room watched her reaction carefully. Monica blinked several times. Me? Victor smiled. Yes, you. A few people laughed gently at her expression of disbelief. Victor continued. Not because you studied nursing. Not because you helped me during an emergency. Because every person I spoke with described the same thing. Character. The word hung in the room. Powerful. Simple. True. Monica looked down at the folder in front of her. Inside was an official invitation to participate in the initiative along with a scholarship fund that would allow her to complete the nursing education she had been forced to leave years earlier if she chose to do so. For several seconds, she could not speak. Emotion filled her eyes. The room remained respectfully quiet. Victor understood that this moment was larger than any apology. It was about restoring fairness. About recognizing value that had existed all along. Monica finally looked up. You do not have to do this. Victor smiled gently. That is exactly why I should. And as the room absorbed the meaning of those words, everyone present realized they were witnessing something rare. Not the rise of a waitress. Not the redemption of a billionaire. But the meeting point between humility and dignity, where both people leave stronger than they arrived. 6 months later, the story that began with a misunderstanding had transformed more lives than anyone could have imagined. The employee development initiative launched by Victor Chin quickly became one of the most respected programs within the company. Managers noticed higher morale. Employees felt more valued. Guests consistently reported better experiences. At the center of it all was a lesson nobody could place on a balance sheet. Respect mattered. Character mattered. People mattered. Monica Harris continued working at the hotel while also returning to nursing school through the scholarship program. The journey was not easy. Her days started before sunrise and often ended long after dark. Classes, assignments, work shifts, and family responsibilities filled nearly every hour. Yet she never complained. She simply kept moving forward, one step at a time, just as she always had. The difference was that now she no longer walked alone. An entire community had begun supporting her success. Coworkers helped adjust schedules when exams approached. Managers encouraged her progress. Fellow students admired her determination. Meanwhile, Victor experienced changes of his own. The incident at the gala remained one of the most important lessons of his career. For years he had believed leadership was primarily about making decisions. Now he understood that leadership also required listening, humility, and the willingness to admit mistakes. He began spending more time meeting employees across different levels of the organization. He asked questions instead of assuming answers. He learned names. He learned stories. He learned that some of the strongest people in his company occupied positions most executives never noticed. One evening, the company hosted another charity gala. The same ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. The same elegant tables filled the room. Yet the atmosphere felt different. Warmer. More human. Guests gathered not only to celebrate charitable achievements, but also to recognize individuals whose actions reflected the values the organization hoped to represent. As the evening progressed, Victor stepped onto the stage. The room quieted immediately. Hundreds of people watched as he looked across the audience. Then he spoke about a lesson he had learned from someone unexpected. He described the danger of judging people too quickly. He spoke about dignity, compassion, and second chances. He never hid his own mistakes. In fact, he acknowledged them openly. Many guests listened with surprise. Few powerful people discussed their failures publicly. Then Victor invited Monica to join him on stage. The audience rose to its feet before she even reached the microphone. Applause filled the ballroom. Some people smiled. Others wiped away tears. Monica looked overwhelmed by the response. She had never sought recognition. Yet the respect surrounding her had been earned honestly. Victor handed her a small plaque commemorating the scholarship fund and employee initiative that had grown from that unforgettable night. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Monica looked toward the audience and shared something simple. She said that every person deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not for the assumptions others make about them. The statement lasted only a few seconds, but its impact lingered throughout the room. As the applause returned, Victor smiled. Monica smiled. And somewhere within that crowd, many people quietly reflected on their own judgments and assumptions. Because the most powerful moment in the story had never been the misunderstanding. It had never been the public embarrassment. It had never even been the apology. The most powerful moment was the choice Monica made when she had every reason to walk away and instead chose kindness. That choice changed a billionaire. It changed a company. And it reminded everyone watching that power may attract attention, but character earns respect that lasts long after the spotlight fades.